Okay, so we're seeing Max Verstappen is having a pretty good season. I think we could all agree on that.
Quite good.
Fernando Alonso's having a pretty good season.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, he's all right.
And Lewis Hamilton is having a pretty good season.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah. All three of them have won Drivers' Championships in the past, multiple times.
Well observed.
Thank you for that fact.
They've all won races. They've all had podiums.
Titles. Yes.
And they've all driven an F1.
The full house.
But the question is, Sam, are these three drivers now clear of the rest of the field when it comes to overall ability? We heard them being very nice to each other on the Canadian podium, didn't we?
Oh, World Championship friends.
It felt very much like that, didn't it?
We can all be mean to each other, but no one else can be mean to us because we're on a level playing field.
You're not in our club.
Yeah, you got to win one of these to come and
World
be mean
Champs
to us.
Club.
Yeah.
I'm still appreciating the Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton love-hate each other.
Yeah,
the love-ins.
They're playing us all.
I think it is genuinely a 100% sporting-only rivalry.
I think they like each other in real life.
I think if they were to retire, like actually retire and walk away, they would be mates.
Yeah. I genuinely
I
do.
also do think that Alonso has been permanently ticked off by the fact that Hamilton did get him in the debut year. I do think that is the only reason. I think if Alonso won that year, not Hamilton, I think there would be no rivalry.
Didn't Alonso technically beat him?
Yeah, he technically won.
Yeah, but no one ever counts it. Come on. they were equal on points. My point being here, of course they've separated themselves. I mean, Leclerc is arguably having his worst season since he started in Formula 1. Norris the same. Russell is in a downward spiral. The spiral hold on. The spiral isn't long. He's at the very top of it, but he's
spiral.
He's teetering on the top of it. And those were realistically the next three in line to be up there with, the big boys, the top dogs. And maybe they are the next generation to step up alongside Verstappen when, the likes of Hamilton and Alonso do finally throw in the towel, in the next 30 years or so. But yeah, I think we saw it again at Canada that they just know how to make it work. They just know how to separate themselves from the rest of the grid. And especially, I'm going to remove Verstappen from this because as much as he is groundbreakingly phenomenal, the car is also groundbreakingly phenomenal. He is his own separate conversation. But the Mercedes and the Aston Martin and the Ferrari are arguably all on an incredibly similar playing field. They all have their own strengths, their own weaknesses, and on different tracks, I would expect one to beat the other very frequently. But it is always Alonso and Hamilton at the moment that do seem to be taking the next step. They are the ones at the front. They're always the ones fighting for second and third. It has to be a bit of an exceptional circumstance this season to see Sainz getting involved. To see, someone like George Russell properly beating both Alonso and Hamilton. He's either there or thereabouts, or this season, he's further behind. Leclerc at the moment is just not with it at the moment. And as much as the points tally is more skewed towards Sainz than it is Leclerc, there is also a reason behind some of those points being that way. So, it will come for them, but I do not think they're there at the moment. I think we've just once again seen just how good the greatest of all time can actually be in comparison to just very good race car drivers.
What do you think, Harry?
I got to say, the watching Alonso and Hamilton...
Best podium of all time, mate?
But
not seen it before.
Not seen it before. Yeah,
Brand
come
new.
on, Lewis, mate. It happened 4 races ago. Anyway.
Memory like mine.
No, it is a joy to watch those two be battling together at the front again. I know Hamilton's been at the front for a long time, but to have Alonso up there, because the battle they had on Sunday, I know it doesn't seem like it was much because Alonso, he had his first opportunity to pass, he did, but it was race long, wasn't it? Really, because they were,
and the move was close, fair, but exciting.
But we've had it with we've had other rivalries like Hamilton Vettel. I know eventually it ended up happening 17 and 18, but we had so many years of those two great drivers just never really having any battles on circuit.
Yeah. And it's a shame that we've had to wait this long. But yeah, so that's a bit of a side point. But yeah, as for this year, I think it's those three. And it's so interesting that it's the two old men, Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso, and then they've let in this young whippersnapper into their club.
Taking them to school again.
Who's schooling them. Kind
Back
of.
to class, old boys.
And that's Max Verstappen. And someone correct me if I'm wrong on this, the last time Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso were on the podium in Canada together was 2013. And the person in the middle, Sebastian Vettel. So another Red Bull driver, and it's like they've just swapped it out. 10 years on,
They've adopted their new
it was
son.
it was those three in 2013. Vettel's gone now.
Being the youngest of those
Yeah.
three.
Now another little young Red Bull whippersnapper's come up.
What's mad is, at this rate, and come on, is that Max Verstappen is going to now have more world titles than Fernando Alonso coming in the year, which feels a bit weird that Fernando is going to now be the least successful of
On
those
that
three.
podium, yeah.
He's already race wins has already happened.
I know,
so,
but it's just
yeah.
it's kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, so my point there was, despite their age and it being 10 years later, I think that proves the talents of Alonso and Hamilton.
Generational talent.
The dominant driver of the time is obviously still the one dominating, but they're the two like supporting pillars of that.
Yeah.
And it's a weird one. So yeah, I think they're clear. The rest of those lot, Russell.
It's a great bit of
Leclerc.
historical analysis. I'm really impressed with that.
Thank you. You're welcome. I think so. I think I saw someone tweet it because they're annoyed that.
Don't give him the credit. I appreciate you saying it.
You're welcome. But they were annoyed that Hamilton has said that it was the best podium of all time, and they tweeted it saying, "No, this one wasn't. It was Vettel in the middle." But
And he had 1-4 at that point. But Hamilton had 1-7.
Hamilton won one.
So I'd argue it's not the best.
Anyway, so to answer your question, yeah.
Yeah, I do like that symmetry back to 2013. I'm looking forward to the 2031 Canadian Grand Prix when Yuma Iwasa wins.
With Fernando Alonso and Lewis
Lewis
Hamilton
Hamilton
next
is still
to him.
there.
Yes,
Alonso's in a wheelchair because he's so old.
it'd still be there though, wouldn't it?
Got a stair lift up to the podium.
Still beating Lewis. My friend.
I tend to think at the moment that Max Verstappen is. I do think Max Verstappen is clear, like even of the other two. I know he's got a dominant car, so it's difficult to judge. But hey, so did Hamilton, so did Alonso.
Yep, fair.
I do think Verstappen is clear at the top at the moment. In terms of who follows on behind that, I don't think Alonso and Hamilton are clear of the. I still think the likes of Leclerc and Russell I would put in that same group, in that Russell beat Hamilton last year. Ocon beat Alonso last year.
You can see Russell in the lie detector say that he is now now definitely faster than Lewis Hamilton.
I didn't watch it, but I saw a picture of that. Did it go off?
He believed that
he believes he is.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a racing driver, you're going to, but like the fact that he was like outright like, yes, I am now faster than Lewis Hamilton.
Which is a good sign.
I mean, he's got the faith in himself.
Yeah. And to be honest, it might be true. Like, it's probably about
It's okay
50-50
to not be
with
as
those
fast as you are now when you're at your peak. Like, time happens.
Yeah. So I think overall, I think I'm going to answer the question weirdly. I think Alonso, Verstappen, and Hamilton are the most complete drivers on the grid. Like, they are as close to 100% of the finished product as you get on the 2023 grid. I think Russell and Leclerc have a little more ways to go to become the final version of themselves, if that makes sense. But actually, in terms of ability, they're not far off. I think they're in that group. But I'm just so happy to, similar to you, I'm just so happy to see. I know it could have been in more of a battle, but to see Hamilton and Alonso, and Hamilton and Verstappen, and Alonso and Verstappen, I would, to an extent, savour this. I know it sounds weird because Red Bull are dominating, but a part of me just wants to savour these three great drivers from three different generations being at the front battling with one another.
That's the mad thing. Fernando Alonso was on the grid when I was 6.
Verstappen was barely born when.
That is the mad
Alonso
thing.
started.
Fernando Alonso had a career as long as Verstappen's had one now, when Hamilton turned up.
Alonso's going to start racing in F1 against the Verstappen and end it against the Verstappen. It's just not going to be the same one. Like, that is his career.
All right, it's a bit of a question. I think I almost know what our answer's going to be. Verstappen at his peak, Hamilton at his peak, Alonso at his peak. Who would you take?
Not Alonso.
Yeah, I don't think I could take Alonso as much as I'd love to.
It's difficult.
I mean, all in the same car. If you could like transport them through time to put in the same car, it would be a phenomenal fight.
I would to get Alonso back in for selfish reasons. If it was just based on a race, then I think he stands a better shout.
Sure.
In terms of raw pace, I think I'd go Hamilton.
Oh, it hurts him.
It's not a hurt. I just genuinely don't like Verstappen, as you said earlier on the other podcast. I don't know,
The other one we
but
did
still
definitely
earlier.
not today.
Verstappen is probably at his
He's entered his peak, I
peak.
think.
He might not even be at the top of it, but and I'm worrying if he has another gear. But the lap at Monaco this year, it's that similar vibe to Singapore 2018 for Hamilton, and that's what I'm struggling with. I don't know which one right now. 2018 Hamilton or 2023 Verstappen.
I would just about go for Hamilton, I think.
I think for me, I'd just creep into Hamilton.
The one thing I want to see from Max Verstappen that we haven't seen from him yet is, and it's fair play to him because he's too good to the point that we can't see it. I just want to see a repeat of 2021 where his racecraft is a little bit better. There were some incidents down the stretch that I put firmly on his doorstep.
Yeah.
And I just want to see another instance of that, but where he can tactically, I don't know, do a little bit better.
He only missed that apex in Brazil by like a whisker.
That was
disgusting.
disgusting.
And it was the only all year where something similar happened. So,
Yeah. Okay, fair.
I don't know. We've heard, I think George Russell said this quite recently, who has made it a habit of talking about everyone else's racecraft other than his own.
Ironically, considering.
I think he said that Verstappen's not racing people as hard this year because he just doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Which he's probably right. But I'd like to see if he is under more pressure. Again, it's on the other teams and the other drivers to get there. I do want to see what his approach is like. Is it the same as it was a couple of years ago?
Enough on that quote, I think Lewis Hamilton has never recovered in that sense from being in the dominant car. Because if you look at his early career from like 08 through to like 13, I think he was so ferociously good at wheel-to-wheel racing where he would always be the one that would take the lunge, he would brake last, he would, get the elbows out. Very much like Verstappen, whereas he was in that dominant Mercedes for so long that he almost got to the point where he was like, I don't need to risk anything. I don't need to push the car any further. And I think now the car stopped being the best car, he's still in the mode of, I shan't take a risk. I won't punish my own outcome because because his mindset is still, the consistency back then was so good, I now don't want to take a risk even though the car is the move. Because I think it's fair to say, we don't see Lewis defending as hard as he used to. We don't see him putting the car in risky positions like he used to. Some for good, maybe some for worse. But I think maybe that's part of that reason.
Yeah. I tend to think that actually, I thought this when they were racing each other, and I'm still thinking now with the Verstappen versus Hamilton. I think Verstappen throughout 2021 was too aggressive, and I think Hamilton's not aggressive enough.
Fair.
I think there is a middle ground between the two of them that neither of them quite was able to get. There have been incidents like, I'll take a random example, the Japanese Grand Prix, where Hamilton was stuck behind Ocon for literally the entire race. It felt like an earlier version of Hamilton would have found a way.
You can sense it. Absolutely sense it.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very fair point. And we should move on for this.
So we are talking properly now. But
obviously many issues around this race, but Abu Dhabi 21, like Verstappen, he raced him all year. Verstappen was always going to send it into a hairpin.
But equally, when Sergio Perez was backing him up, he should have just sent it, planted it.
Yeah, nailed him. Anyway.
And I think, 3-4 years ago, he would have done.
At least with the Perez incident, he had the rest of the race that he had to look out for. With that last lap, though, he had nothing to lose, did he? I always thought that the worst one was, him not defending the inside into whatever number that is was something. But him not being able to at least try something on the second straight into the brand new, that was always the one I was like, you could have done more there.
Well, back to therapy I go, because that's brought up a load of horrid thoughts. So
back to Abu Dhabi.
Good. It is one of the most iconic races in Formula One history.
Before we move on, I just did want to say one thing on the sort of generation gap between Alonso and Verstappen, because it's not even really a generation gap. It's probably a 2-generation gap between them.
Yeah.
There's 16 years between Alonso and Verstappen, which just got me thinking that imagine some of the rivalries we could have had if that same age gap had been applied. It's actually the same number of years between Schumacher and Hamilton. Now, I know they raced at the same time for a couple of years, but it was never, we never got that as a rivalry, really. It's just fascinating to think that Alonso and Verstappen sharing the same piece of racetrack right now, age-wise, is as feasible as Hamilton and Schumacher could have been, which is why I think we should savour it to an extent.
The idea of peak Hamilton versus peak Schumacher gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
That fuels a very strange excitement in me.
A little bit excited.
It does, and it will never happen. It's quite sad.